pre-Labour Party government started by the agreement between Fernando Enrique Cardoso's PSDB and Lula's PT during the elections of 2002. We must not forget that the Brazilian state has its owners, and they are the big national capitalists and mainly the big foreign capitalists. The main articulator of the victory of PT during the elections of 2002 was the future PT Super Minister José Dirceu. PT won those elections with the support of the big national capitalists and the agreement with the American imperialists. You have the right to know the truth.
The governments of the three largest states of the Brazilian Federation, São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Minas Gerais, remained under the control of right-wing parties. As part of the general agreement, PT had never made any effort to at least try to win those elections. PT governments benefited from raw materials high prices, artificially inflated by the high volumes of speculative capitals that became superfluous after the internet bubble crisis in 2001 and the stock market crisis in 2003 and 2004. Using part of these resources, important social programs were carried out. Those lifted 16 million people out of extreme poverty. They also allowed poor people to increase consumption and go to university. At the same time, the big banks made profits as never before, in Lula's own words. Financial speculation sprang up, iron ore exports broke all records. The crisis of the Mensalão scandal partially exposed weaknesses of PT governments. The Mensalão scandal was related to monthly payments made to parliamentarians by PT administrations using big companies' corruption money. Big businessmen were happy with the high profits and the containment of social struggles, but they were not willing to take risks as they needed to divert attention from the Banestado scandal, the biggest corruption case in the history of Brazil. Whenever the right wing begins a campaign against corruption, it means that there are overtly coup d'etat objectives. PT managed to win the 2006 elections, but it was forced to accept the PMDB party in the government. The pace of privatization was reduced, and the regime for public concessions and outsourcing started to be prioritized. That worked as a whitewashed version or a disguised privatization. In the countryside, the so-called agribusiness took complete control, while the leadership of the Landless Workers Movement, the MST, put an end to the struggle for the land during the PT administrations. The four largest companies in that sector imposed the legalization of 30 transgenic seeds right after the creation of ICMBio, the Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity. That was a worldwide record. Under the first Dilma administration, the new Forest Code was approved. It represented a huge attack to Brazilian biomes. The Ministry of Justice came under the control of the right wing within the PT, which is a group called the Judicial PT, or to use its official name, the Message to the Party. Several of the laws that were passed were even against the 1988 Constitution. They were used a few years later by the car wash operation against the PT itself. To name just a few. Let's see. There was the autonomy of the federal police and the public ministry, the Clean Record Law from 2010, the Criminal Organizations Law together with the Awarded Claims Law from 2013. Of course, there was the Anti-Corruption Law from 2014 and the Anti-Terror Act from 2015. And there are other ones. The 2000 crisis arrived in Brazil being nothing more than a small wave, according to Lula. It was contained, thanks to huge volumes of public credit, which maintained a high level of consumption at the expense of the increase in personal default. In order to keep their ability to govern, they had to make big concessions to the right wing, promising them ministries and key positions, as well as making dubious alliances in Congress to make sure that main bills would be approved. Streams of easy money continue to flow from the corruption pockets of large companies using the very same mechanisms that had been working for many decades. PT's main style of government consisted of making and maintaining agreements with the right wing and imperialism, while allocating some buckets to social programs. That model was also applied in an attempt to boost the national champion companies favored by public money. They began to expand to Africa and to other countries in Latin America.
Everything worked pretty well in the magic governments of PT Labour Party. Social programs allowed hundreds of thousands of people to enter the university, and at the same time, the education capitalist vultures made a lot of money. The economy did well because of the flooding of the market by public money. According to Lula's own words, bankers had never made so much money before. But at the same time, PT Labour Party's government had an important weakness. Their control of the state apparatus was so weak.
Production had been carried out in a super predatory manner, destroying nature and storing toxic mud in swimming pools that later on began to burst, transforming ecological rivers into forever uninhabitable places, as if they were pieces of Mars on Earth. The bulk of the invoices for raw materials did not go to the purchasers, the most important raw material consumer from Brazil being, of course, China. They were traded on commercial and futures exchanges such as those in Singapore, Chicago, London, and Zurich. Those speculators added additional 80% of the value to the invoices, contributing with criminal financial derivatives that represent the most important part of financial speculation. In Brazil, only 20% of the total value remained, aside from, of course, the environmental degradation. In order for the Bank of Brazil to grant certain loans, invoices started to be required. And the only ones that were accepted were the ones, of course, from Monsanto, Bayer, Syngenta, BASF, and similar companies. Brazil became the worldwide champion in the use of pesticides and the second worldwide champion in the use of transgenics. It approved without any testing even pesticides that were prohibited in neighboring Paraguay. The decadence of the PT, the Labour Party, started in 2012. the second half of 2012, PT leaders were arrested under the Mensalão process. In the municipal elections coinciding with the week of the first and second rounds, the Mensalão judgments took place. Even so, PT won the elections in the largest city in South America, São Paulo. That was a clear signal from the right wing associated with FHC, which saw itself confronted with an electoral failure of their neoliberal project and the growing crisis after the 2008 global capitalist collapse. At the end of 2012, the system began to show serious cracks. Dilma Rousseff's administration made huge concessions to the white line sector in order to avoid bankruptcy, and that was extended on the following year to the other economy sectors. In June 2013, the most openly fascist right-wingers played a dangerous card, rallying and bringing hardcore fascists out to the streets. That happened when it became clear that the police could be overpassed by the mass movement against the increase in the bus ticket price. Big businessmen with a long tradition in coups became involved in the campaign, mainly the Global Network, Verdal Group, and the Federations of Industries of São Paulo, Fiesp, Rio de Janeiro, Firjan, and Minas Gerais, PM, with the close participation of the United States Embassy. The emerging crisis of the regime became evident when the bourgeoisie suspected that PT policies would not be able to control the stability of the regime and maintain its high profits. In 2014, the bourgeoisie was divided over Dilma's re-election, but there was much fear about the eventual destabilization of the regime, just as it had happened at the end of FHC governments. In order to face the crisis, Dilma Rousseff chose a banker directly linked to financial speculation, Joaquim Levy of Bradesco Bank. It was as if she was trying to attempt to put an end to a big fire using gasoline. In March 2014, extreme right groups took to the streets for the first time with their own identity. A march entitled March of the Family with God and for Freedom, The Return, was taking place then. In the middle of the same year, the right wing boosted the There Will Be No Football Cup campaign. At the beginning of 2015, the Out Dilma Now protests started. That movement ended with President Dilma Rousseff impeached in April 2016. In 2016, the bourgeoisie was unified to impose Dilma's impeachment. Lula's maneuvers to reach an agreement with the right did not succeed, even though he had promised to privatize the social security system and Petrobras. In the 2016 municipal elections, PT joined a coalition with the right-wing parties that participated in the coup against Dilma at the federal level. Only with DIM, PSDB, and PMDB, PT joined in 1,682 municipalities. To recall, the PSOL candidate in Rio de Janeiro was also supported by Global Network. So, the PT and its policy evolved to integrate into the developing coup. Now the leftist parties could also be seen as a Bolsonarist left, since they contribute to the Bolsonaro government massacre of Brazil. At the end of 2020, the super rich are ready to kill their own mothers in order to save themselves from the word crisis, which is only becoming more perceptible. There is no room for new PT-style governments. Capitalism no longer works. It cannot open important factories or companies. What it has to offer is the massacre through bayonets, wars, death, diseases, unemployment, hunger, and mass destruction.
As the worldwide capitalist crisis deepened, big capitalists needed to massacre Brazil and Latin American peoples in order to stabilize their profit rates that kept falling down. They started to reduce their political tolerance and to change the political system. Capitalist vultures needed to slaughter our people in order to save themselves from their crisis. Lava Jato car wash operation was set up in order to reach those goals under a huge campaign against the corruption struggle. This is the subject of our next chapter of this series. You have the right to know the truth.
Hi, my name is Lizzie Ma, and if you're watching this, you're probably gonna recognize my voice in case you watch the episodes of Odoleiro in English. Odoleiro is a web series conceived and produced by Gazeta Revolucionária and the channel Duplo Expresso. We wanted to thank you for your support until here, in case you donated money to the crowdfunding campaign, or if you're just watching, sharing, commenting, all of which is very important. We're gonna have to take 2 weeks off because that does take some time to produce all of it. So if you want to rewatch or share again with your friends the last 6 episodes that we put out there, please feel free to do so. We're having a super hard time with the communication and getting visibility. You know, it's tough these days on YouTube, but we're gonna try to make it happen. And we're very lucky and happy to have any anti-imperialist help we can. Okay, take care. See you in 2 weeks. Bye.
A pulsão da energia, na pulsação do som, a sensação, a circulação ativa, orgânica batida do beat do seu coração. Tem que ter coragem, mas tem que ter um dom. Tem que ter amor, mas tem que ter razão. Tem que ter suor, mas tem que ter swing. Energia que nunca se extingue. 100% no momento, 100%. A revolução real, a principal, é de dentro pra fora e não de fora pra dentro. Bote isso de uma vez por todas dentro do seu pensamento. Bote isso de uma vez por todas dentro do seu pensamento.